Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikas from Big Mount Studio. If you're interested in iOS development and periodically want to learn cool stuff, then click below to subscribe and click on the bell icon to get notified when I come out with new videos on iOS development. In the last two videos, we added swipe actions to our table. But you know one thing I don't like about swipe actions is they're not readily apparent to the user. Meaning when the user comes in and they see the table view, they can't tell right away that you can swipe the cells back and forth. So let's educate our users that swipe actions are available. But what is a good way to do this? Should we create another view controller for the help screen, or maybe use a modal pop-up? Well, those are definitely options, but I'm looking for a simpler solution in this case. We're going to add a UI view to the view controller's scene dock, and as you can see in the picture, it's that bar that is right above the view controller. And then we're only going to show it during certain circumstances, such as when there are rows or trips being shown. If there's no rows being shown, then it doesn't really make any sense to show the help screen that you can swipe rows, right? Okay, so let's jump into Xcode and let's build this thing. But first, task organization. And what I mean by task organization is we're going to go into Bitbucket where our code is being stored. And inside of Bitbucket, it has this feature called boards. And on this board, we're keeping track of our minimal viable product for version 1. And that's that column you see right here. And we're also keeping track of what we're doing right now and what we've done in the past. So we've already done edit trips. So I'm going to move that over here. And our next thing is to show a help screen. So I'm going to move that right here. Now for one person, this is pretty handy where you can keep track of all the tasks, as a reminder, as you think of things, you can add tasks during your day. And it's especially helpful when there's more than one programmer working on the project, because then in the doing this week, you can see what each person is working on. Okay, we're in Xcode now. And as you may have noticed, there's some changes here because I did install Mojave and it gives it a dark theme. So let me know how this works on YouTube, if it's easy to read or not, and I can make adjustments accordingly. All right, so I have made some changes to some of our view controllers here. And let's just take a look. You see the ones with the M next to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button right here so we can see what changed. And I'll just scroll down. Okay, yeah, right here, this line right here. In the last trip when we worked on editing, swiping to edit, one thing I didn't change is the label that shows on the pop-up. So if we come into this if statement, that means we're in edit mode because we have an index to edit, some data to edit. So I just changed the label to edit trip. Now notice I don't change it back to add trip because when the modal pop-up closes, everything is gone and everything gets reset. And the default is add trip. Okay, so that's that. And let's look at the differences here. Oh, okay, this is a good one. A viewer brought this up. They said when you edit a trip and cancel and then go to add a trip, you're going to see the trip you're trying to edit first. And that's because we didn't set this trip index to nil. So in our segue, when we navigate to the pop-up where we want to edit the trip or add a trip, I'm just going to set this index to nil every time. Whether it needs it or not, I'm just going to nil it out because I don't need it after this. Once that pop-up is open, I don't need that value in there. So I'm just going to set it to nil. Oh, and one more thing. You might see that this assets folder, there's some modifications there. All I did was add some visual assets that we're going to use for our help screen. So we want to show users that they can swipe to delete or swipe to edit. So I have some screenshots there and we're going to use that. Man, it's taking a while to commit. I wonder if it's from poor internet connection or because those images I added were really big. Wow, so that commit took a really long time. I ended up having to cancel it and then pushing it again, and then it went right away. So I'm not quite sure if that was a bug in Xcode or Bitbucket or both. All right, let's continue though. We're going to start with the trips view controller. And remember from that mock-up I had on the first slide, I showed the help screen. It had a title, had two images, and then it had a button down at the bottom, right? So that's what we're going to build. And like I said before, we're going to use the scene dock. We're going to put a view inside this scene dock. And when it comes time, we're going to show that help screen. Now what I used was, I didn't put a UI view in here. I actually used a blur effect. So let's add the blur effect. And in Xcode 10, you can't, if you look at this side here, if you show the right pane over here, it doesn't have the controls over here anymore, the object library. Instead, you have to use this button right here to pull up the object library. And in here, you just start searching for whatever it is you need. We need a blur control. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to stick it in the scene doc. I thought I was. So let's try it again. You got to get it so that little blue line shows up. It's really hard to see. There we go. Maybe if I zoom in a little bit, it'll be easier. Okay, now we have our blur effect. What I want to do from here is I want to make it a little bit bigger so it kind of matches like the size of the screen. It gives us kind of like a realistic view of our help screen. That should be good enough. And let's just zoom in there a little bit. Okay, now on this blur control, we need a couple things. We need the label and 2 images and a button. So in order to bring up the object library, like I said, you can just click on this button up here. But if you want, you can just hit Command-Shift-L for library. Command-Shift-L. All right, we need a label. And what else? We need a couple of images. I'll just copy that image later after I set some properties. And then we need a button. So you guys that have been using Xcode 10 for a while, let me know in the comments below. Are you liking this object library, how it works now by having to hit Command-Shift-L, or would you rather have it back in the right pane? Because for me, I kind of got used to it being in the right pane, but I kind of see their thinking where you can keep this right pane closed more often to give you more space, and the object library just comes up when you need it. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite sold on it yet. Maybe I just need some more time to get used to it. But let me know what your thoughts are. So let's grab this button. We'll throw this down here for now. Okay, let's set the label. And what did I have it say before? I think I said swipe rows for more features. All right, there we go. And we need an image. And this one is the delete, not the delete. We want the delete swipe. This one. Okay, stretched out. We don't want that. We want to keep its aspect. And then, yeah, let's copy that. And the other image will be edit swipe. Okay. This text, I think we want that to be white and centered. White. And let's increase the size here a little bit. Yeah, 30 should be good enough. Right now, it's going off. So, when we're designing a screen, we got to think about how it's going to look on other size devices, like the SE being the smallest. So what we can do, instead of just having one line, I'm going to change this to 0, and we'll have it wrap if it needs more space. So when you change it to 0, that just means it'll use as many lines as it needs in order to show according to its constraints. And that's the next thing I want to work on too is, how are we going to constrain this so it's always centered and it looks nice? It's up toward the top, and also considering we need it to look nice for different size devices too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a stack view, and I'm only going to use it for these top 3 controls. I don't want to include the button because the button I want to stay down at the bottom. So now in order to embed in a stack view, you might have been used to coming down here and clicking a button, but this button is different now. It's an embed button. You can embed it in a view without the insets. Because remember when you used to embed things in views, it'll always give it a margin, and then you had to remove those margins and stretch it out and whatever. So I'm glad they have it without the inset now. We want the stack view. There we go. Puts it in a vertical stack view for us. That's fine. And then we're going to set some constraints on this so it looks nice, because right now it's stretching off or outside the bounds, right? Now, we got to think about this. So, I have this set to iPhone XS. But what it doesn't show in this view is there's going to be a notch at the top, right? So we have to account for that notch and give it enough space from the top. So let's do this. Let's start with 40. Then we'll give it a margin. We'll say 18. And I'm not going to give it a bottom margin because with a stack view, it'll just expand downward as much, using as much space as it needs. So I only need 3 constraints for the stack view. And, it looks like it could use some cleaning up here. We need more space in between here. So let's go look at our properties. Center, yeah, that's another thing I want to change. I'm going to make it fill. So it fills out vertically. And then the spacing, I like to stick with the standard value, which I think is 8. That usually works for most cases. Okay, so everything looks good there. Now let's handle this button here. Let's add some constraints to that. I'm not going to give it a top constraint. I'm going to give it a bottom constraint. And again, we'll start with 40 from the bottom. We have to keep in mind, like the X phones, they have that, I forget what it's called, that bar down at the bottom where you can swipe up. I forgot what that's called. So if you guys remember, let me know in the comments because it's slipping my mind right now. Okay, and let's give it the same margins as before. 18. I mean, the same margins as our stack view, right? Okay, and we'll add those 3 constraints. Oh, and let's give it a height. Let's give it 44. 44 is a good number to use because that's the same height as the default cells and table views. And I kind of like the number 44 because a lot of sized buttons and icons that you tap on, they're usually 44 because maybe that's the size of the average person's finger. So it's just a good number for me that I like to use. All right, and one more thing. So this button, how do we want to style this button? Oh, remember this button is going to be used to close this pop-up. So this button, we want to style it so it looks like our other buttons that we use, like on our pop-up, the cancel and the save. So what I'm going to do is, how did we style those buttons? We used a custom control to do the styling for us. So if I come to the custom classes, and we'll see this app UI button, and that should style it so it's orange, the text is white, and it gives it rounded corners. All right, good. So our help view is styled for now. We'll run it and see what it looks like. But if I run it, it's not going to show this help view because remember, I have to show anything that's in this scene doc here, I have to show manually in code. So in order to show it programmatically, what I'm going to have to do is create an outlet for it. So let's do this. Let's make some space. And we'll add it right here. Now I'm just going to grab it from the scene doc, right click, drag it, and we'll just call this the help view. Okay, now let's add it. I'm going to add it right here for now, and we'll add it as a subview to the view. Now the view, in case you don't remember, is like the root view of your view controller. You don't need an outlet for it because it already exists. It's just always there. Every view controller has this root view. So I'm going to add a subview, and it's going to be my help view. And let's see what that looks like for now. Okay, good. So there's a couple of things that we need to change. One is I want to use the blur control that's darker. So we'll change that to dark. The stack view, it doesn't look right. It's got like too much space going on there. And our help view, it doesn't fill the whole screen. So that's because what it's doing is it's showing it using the same dimensions that we see in our interface builder. So we're going to have to set the dimensions to be whatever fits the device. So what I'm going to do is go back into the code here, and I'm going to change the frame of our help view to match the views frame. Okay, and let's go back in here to our blur control, and I'm going to change that to dark. Okay, now what's happening in the stack view here is it's filling out, it's like it's using a different height for each cell inside the stack view. So we need to constrain that stack view because the UI image view is expanding vertically beyond the size of the image, right? Let me just show you. I'll give you a better idea. We need to set a breakpoint. So let me set a breakpoint here. And let's click on this button. Oh man, we need some space here, don't we? There we go. Okay, this is like a visual debugger here. And if we look, like this is the size of the image, I believe. Yeah, UI image view right here. So the height is expanding higher than the actual size of the image. So let's constrain that. Let's make it more narrow. Make it shorter. And the way we do that is just basically just putting a height on it. So let's see, let's see if we can do this. We have the heights on both of them. Just gonna come here, I'll go to height, and it's 113. We can probably go a little bit higher. Let's go with 150. There we go. Okay, let's run it now and see how it looks. Forgot about that breakpoint. Let's just continue from there. All right, that looks better, right? Maybe I want to have this come down a little bit more. Give it a little bit more space. No, let's test it on the smallest phone. Let's test it on the SE. Another thing I was concerned about was the height down here at the bottom, the spacing. That does look good. You should have enough space there to slide up like that. Okay, yeah, so let's test it on the SE, make sure it looks good on there. Yeah, that actually looks good. So I think it's fine. I'm not going to mess around with any more of the adjustments. The smallest phone looks good. So let's stick with that. Now the next thing we need to do is program up this close button here. Make sure we can get rid of it. And we'll make some space for it right here. And action, let's just call it close help view. And we're passing in the app UI button, connect that. Okay, and what do we want to do? Well, in order to close it or get rid of it, we're not dismissing it because it's not a pop-up, right? The way we're adding it is just with add subview. So it's being added as a subview. So we need to remove it as a subview. And the way you do that is you just use the control itself, the help view, and you just say remove me from the subview. Remove from superview, I mean. Remove me from the superview. So that's the function you use here, remove from superview. So that should work. Let's test it and see how that looks. I'm just going to go back to the XS here. Click close and it goes away. Now you notice it went away pretty quickly and just kind of disappeared. Personally, I kind of like more like animation, like to have it fade out. So maybe we can do that. Maybe let's add some animation to it. Just a real simple animation. UI view dot animate and interval. Let's say like 0.5 seconds for animation. I'm going to hit tab and then hit enter, and this is where we enter in our animation. And here, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the help view and I'm going to change its alpha, like fade it out, change its alpha to 0. And then if it completes successfully, then I'll remove it from the super view. Okay, and let's see how that looks. Oh, of course, yeah, we need the self in there. Fix those and try it again. Now I want to explain something to you before we test this out. If any of you have ever had experience with animating the blur control, like changing its alpha property, Apple highly recommends that you don't do this, that you don't even touch the alpha property, because unexpected things might happen. So I don't know if they changed something in iOS 12, because I don't notice the same problem as before. Before iOS 12, when I would try to do this, change the alpha of a blur control to 0, gradually, like animating it, it wouldn't work. It would just disappear. Or everything else would fade out, and then the blur control would just disappear. So I'm not quite sure if they fixed something. If you guys know, let me know in the comments down below. Or if you want to do this a different way to guarantee that there won't be any problems in the future, like I'm kind of taking a chance here, right? Changing the alpha of the blur control because Apple recommends against it. Then instead of using a blur control, we can always use just a regular UI view and give it an opacity of like 80% so we can see behind it a little bit. So let's try this. Let's click close and it fades out. Like I said, iOS 12, I'm not sure what they changed or something is different now, but it works great. So I'm going to keep it for now. I'm going to take my chances. Okay, we have a help screen and it's working great, but do we want to show this help screen every single time the user opens the app? No way. That would be a bad user experience, right? You see it one time, you get it, you close it, and you don't want it to come back up again. So how are we going to do this? We need to store a value somewhere that tells us if the user has seen this help screen or not. One way that comes to mind is using user defaults. Well, what is this user defaults and what does it do and what does it not do? Well, user default stores data in your app, and other apps cannot access this data. It's data that is specific to your app only. And the good thing about it is the data gets persisted when your app closes or your phone restarts. So the next time you start the app and you read this data, it's going to have the last value that you stored in it. So that's pretty cool. And userdefaults is pretty easy to use because it uses key value pairs to store the data. So you just use the key to set the data and retrieve the data. Well, this sounds like it'll work for our situation, so let's use this. Okay, let's make some space here. So there are two things that we have to code here. When they click the close button, we have to record that they have seen this trip help, right? So when we close it, let's come down here. Okay, here's where we remove the help view from the super view. So let's just save it right here. And the way we do this is we go into userdefaults.standard, and then we want to set a value. And as you can see, there's all kinds of different options. We can set a URL, we can set anything, a Boolean, double. Well, Boolean is what we want, right? Okay, and what's the value we want to set? We want to set a true. True meaning, yes, they have seen and closed the help view. So we need a key for it. So we'll just call this seen trip help. So what this will do is this will store the value true for the key seen trip help. So when the view loads, we want to show the help screen if they haven't seen it before. So let's create an if statement here, and let's access the user defaults, and we have to look at that value, and it's right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a Boolean, and I'm going to get it for a specific key, and the key I used before was what? Seen help view, like that. And then I'll just say, you know, if it equals false, then show me the help view. Okay, let's indent this. Now, one of the things that I like to do is if I use a string more than once, I kind of like to put it into its own variable, because if I want to change it for any reason, I don't have to change it in both places. And I also run the risk is when I retype in a string, or if I need to use it again somewhere else, I have to type it in again or copy and paste it. It's just riskier. There's a slight chance for error there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy this, and I'm going to put it in a variable instead, without the quotes. There we go. So we'll just use the variable. And again, that way, if I need to change the value of this, I could just change it right here. All right, good. So that looks good. So let's, oh, something's happening here. I think it needs the self. Oh yeah, because we're inside of a block here. Okay, good. Okay, so let's test this out and see if it works. No, there's some other problem. What is it? Okay, this is a good example. I don't even know if you guys notice this, but I did type it wrong. And this is a perfect example of why we should use a variable instead. So I did type it in wrong. Oh, that's funny. Okay, good. So we fixed it. Now let's run it and make sure it works. So we'll know it works because if we run it one time, the help view should show. And then when I close it, it's going to record in the user defaults value of true. So when it comes back into this if statement, it's going to say, oh, it's true, and it'll just skip over this. And the way we just test it is we just close it, run it again. And there you go. The help view did not come up again. So you might ask yourself, well, what if I still want to do more work to it? How do I get it to come back up? The thing you're going to have to do is just delete the app. That's probably the easiest and the quickest. I guess you could code a button somewhere that makes it come back up. And maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to have something in your settings that says reset help screens, so the help screens come back up. That would be a pretty cool feature. All right, this looks good. Let's close it, and it goes away nicely. Now remember, there's something else we want too. Let me just close this here. Here, let's delete this. And then I'm going to change something so we don't have data that shows up. We don't have trips that come up by default. Now remember, those 3 trips come up by default because that's mock data. We had those trips show because we wanted to see how it looked, you know, when we're designing it. So let's go into our trip functions and let's comment out this data right here. This is our mock data that we're providing. Now, here's a situation. When you run the app, there are no rows. So it's giving you these features that says, oh, you can swipe the rows for more features, and they close it, and there's like, well, there's no rows. So maybe we don't want to show them the help screen at this point. Maybe we only want to show them the help screen when there's at least one row. So let's do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this code, because at this point we don't know if there's rows or not. But after we get the data and it reloads, we know that if there will be rows at that point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the data, and I'll say data trip models, because remember at this point, after it's done reading the trips, this trip models should be populated. This is where we store all of our trips. So I'll check the count, and if the count is greater than 0, then we know we're going to have some rows in our table view. And I'll just put it in there like that. Okay, so we're going to have to update this here with a bunch of selves. So let's just go in here and add these. Oh, you know, it wants something else too. Because this is weak, that means like this self could be nil or not nil, right? And you notice how we're using a question mark here. You know, if it's not nil, then it won't call this reload data, for example. So we'll have to add question marks to all of these. But instead, if you wanted to, if you're certain that, you know, self basically just means this view controller, right? We're passing in this view controller into this read trips function. But of course, we know that self will of course exist because, you know, won't even be, you know, because the view controller won't be calling this function unless this view controller did exist. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to change this to unowned. And that just basically means that we know it's going to exist. We know there's definitely going to be a view controller that's passed in. It won't be nil. So we can get rid of that. Oh, you know, we still need selves on these. So let's go and add those. I can't click it. Can't click it, so I'm just going to have to do it manually here. Can I click on this one? Yes. Where's my fix? Okay, there we go. That should work. Again, if you're confused by the weak and unknown that I just talked about here, watch that Swift Memory Mastery series, and it will clear all of that up for you. It clears it up easily. I use a lot of pictures and a lot of examples, so you shouldn't have any trouble understanding it. All right, let's run this again and see how that works. Okay, great. There's no rows, and so that help screen didn't come up. Now if we go back into our data and we uncomment this, then we run it again, there are rows. Oh, you know, okay. Let's delete the app and clear out the user settings here. There we go. So there are rows, and so it does show. So that's perfect. That's what we want. So showing a help screen looks pretty easy, right? I showed you some basics, but there's a lot of room for growth. In this video, you learned how to add a UI view to the scene doc and put your help info in there. And then you learned how to show that help screen, adding it as a sub view and setting the frame. And then we included some logic to show it there as well, you know, when there's rows and we only show it one time. And we did that by teaching you how to use user defaults. And all this is good info to have when you're working on your own apps. This data will give you more options to help you succeed when implementing solutions, whether at work or on your own app. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click on that like button, share it on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and do subscribe because I'm coming out with more videos and we're going to build this app out so it's a full-featured app. If you'd like to help out the channel, consider adding translations for just the title and the description in your native language, and that'll help people in your own country find this video. Alright guys, thanks for watching.